Hello and good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Happy Friday. We are super excited to be kicking off today's episode with the one and only Dr. Daniel Thomas. How are you doing today, Dr. Thomas?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Wonderful. So excited to have you here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So before I get going into this, because I'm super excited to start, I just had to share a short disclaimer. So just to say the views I share in here are my own, and I don't represent Penn State Health or the Penn State College of Medicine, Johns Hopkins, where I trained, or any other of my affiliated organizations. This conversation is only for general education discussion, so it's not medical advice, and I have no financial disclosures or conflicts of interest.
There we go. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with a classic lightning round. So if you could answer these questions in 10 seconds or less, and here we go. What is one thing that med school just did not prepare you for?
I would say that care needs to start with the person's goals instead of the disease that we're focused on.
Ooh, I love that. That's good. I'm going to clip that out and use it somewhere else. Next one, genes, lifestyle, or luck? What matters most for living to 100?
So, genes and lifestyle to get to 70.
Okay.
And then after that, it's really genes.
Okay, that's a hot take. I'll take it. I love it. Scrubs or suit? Which makes you feel more powerful?
Oh, that's hard. Maybe, honestly, probably still a suit. But I like both.
I'm team scrubs all the way. And I'll do one more, and that is no, I'll do two more. What is one thing that you do for your own longevity?
Get outside every day.
Wow, I love it. Did you hear that, everybody? Get outside every day. And last thing, what gives you hope about the future of aging in America?
So we have more information and tools to live healthier than ever before in human history. We just have to use it.
Ah, yes, I love it. You are just giving us amazing quotes left and right, Dr. Thomas. Thank you. But I am curious. So, if someone were to only listen to the first couple of minutes of this podcast, what do you really want them to walk away from?
This is I'm gonna say a couple. I'm gonna say a couple things that might be jarring, but I'm hopeful will actually be helpful to think about.
Please, we're all about jarring.
Yeah. If we're all dying slowly, how do we learn to enjoy the journey instead of trying to avoid the destination? That's the first one. The other one I thought about, and I think there's actually two things I want to say. The second thing is, and this gets into a little bit of, it's almost a philosophical question of what is the point of healthcare? The goal of medicine and healthcare is not giving people more years or allowing them to be able-bodied in of itself. Those are just tools. They're only valuable when they help us create lives that feel meaningful to the person who's living them.
Wow. That's amazing. I guess, hey, you heard it here first. So listen to one of the youngest geriatric doctors that is out there right now. So actually, speaking of, Dr. Daniel Thomas is a geriatrics attending at Penn State Health who spent years training at Johns Hopkins. But here's what's really cool about him, what I think is really cool. It's that he's figured out that his 85-year-old, 75-year-old, 80-year-old patients are often some of the best teachers. So I feel like he's learned the most important stuff about aging and living well. It doesn't really come from the textbooks, but it comes from listening to the people who've mastered the art of getting older by actually getting older. So the newest generations of geriatric physicians. What surprised you the most about just working with older adults?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway for me has been that people just want to be seen, right? So I think people get intimidated by that whole older adult concept. Oh, these are people who are jaded. Maybe they're cynical. Maybe it's depressing to work with them because life is already in the rearview mirror. Maybe they have problems that can't be fixed. Some doctors are really allergic to the idea that they're going to work with people where they can't fix the problem, quote unquote, right? And so for me, you go into it with a certain set of expectations and assumptions that you're bringing into it as a young physician. And you know that patient's going to bring in a lot of assumptions based on 30 plus years, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years of interacting with the healthcare system,
Mhm.
right? So there's a lot of like baggage that comes into that encounter. But
Right.
what I have found is when you cut through all that noise, people just want to be seen. They
Oh,
just want to be understood. They
absolutely.
want their story to be heard, and they want to feel like the person sitting next to them really sees them as a person and not as a disease process and not as another office visit and not as just an old person, but just a person. And so when you strip away everything else, I think people actually respond really well.
Oh, I love that answer. I am really curious. So, like, I guess you said earlier you started medical school around like 21. So, 21-year-old Daniel Thomas, did you think that you would be a geriatrician ever? Like, was that like your goal?
No, it wasn't, and that's a great question. So I was very interested in how systems interact. So my
Okay.
background is actually like from a business background, and I think everyone in our generation understands that healthcare is broken, right? We understand that almost no one is happy with
Mhm.
the status quo, and yet nobody seems to really know how to fix it. And so that was kind of my interest in saying, how do I get involved in understanding the business side of this, and how do I understand um, how to align incentives, like financial incentives, with values. And so that was sort of my passion. I was thinking internal medicine. I was thinking being a generalist, but I wasn't specifically thinking about geriatric medicine. It almost seemed too limiting. Like I wanted to see all sorts of patients of all ages. I always have loved working with older adults in general, and some of that probably is cultural, but I never thought this was going to be the one population I'd focus on. But
Yeah.
as I went through my training, I think two things. One is I met people who were incredible physicians and realized many of the physicians that I most resonated with from a values perspective were geriatricians. And
Wow.
then two, I had this understanding sort of evolve is that so already 65, 70% of all the patients you see in the hospital are 65 plus, right? So most doctors are actually involved with geriatrics, even if they don't realize it. So then the question is, can you treat an 80-year-old the same way you treat a 40-year-old? And I strongly believe the answer is no. But
Mhm.
people, the entire medical system is not designed. We're designed as a one size fits all approach, and people do not tailor their way of delivering care to older adults, right? So we don't have age-friendly healthcare systems, which is kind of like a buzzword in geriatric circles, but
Yeah.
it doesn't exist, right? So we have that coupled with a rapidly aging population, especially with the boomer generation, really cresting into retirement and into older age. And so there's just a massive need in the country to think about how to deliver care differently to older adults.
Mhm.
And we're just not set up for that yet. So I started getting extremely passionate about what I could contribute in this sphere.
That is so incredible. And I feel like Hopkins is one of the greatest places to train for that. I mean, having met Dr. Esther O, she just seems so incredible and so inspiring. And so, really, really glad to have at least one more geriatrician added to the small pool. And hopefully, this inspires a few others to come out of the woodworks as well. But, you know, I feel like this is the question that people all want the answer to. What do you think is something that everyone just should start doing today if they want to age as healthily as possible, other than going outside?
Yeah, I think a huge aspect. I mean, the going outside and exercising is a huge aspect. Nothing that I'm going to say here is groundbreaking, but I actually do believe it's part of the secret. Is if you eat tasty, healthy meals
Mhm.
and then stop before you're full, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of people talk about how, oh, the food is better in Europe or overseas. I don't think that's actually true. I've lived overseas for a bit, for a few months, and I just think you eat smaller portions and you just walk a lot more. And people eat wine, they eat beer, bread, cheese. I mean, it's not, this keto optimized high protein diet that people are eating over there.
Yeah.
It's the calories. I mean, it's that simple. It's like calories in, calories out. And longevity is very strongly associated with maintaining a healthy body composition, weight, and I'm not at all saying that you have to be at a specific weight point. I think BMI is kind of overrated as a way of measuring actual health.
Yeah.
But the idea that we all we're evolutionarily designed to try to store food for the times where we won't get the food. It
Right.
just doesn't work with a Western, 3 meals a day, and each meal is bigger than the last, and and plus snacks in between. And once you get used to that, then you're creating all sorts of downstream effects that add up over the years.
That's such a good point about the each meal being bigger than the last. I feel like I'm guilty of that too. I start out with breakfast, like something really, really small, which probably shouldn't be the case. I feel like that should be your biggest meal of the day. And then it just keeps tornadoing as it goes along with, but that's great advice. I'm actually going to take that myself. So thank you. So now tell me about a myth about aging that you just find yourself debunking constantly. You're like, that's just not true.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's a myth that I actually debunk for my patients who are older as well, which is everything is downhill after 65. I mean, people really think that, right? And some people will be like, oh, it's all downhill after 35. And it's false for one, but it's also really lazy because I think it reflects this idea that we sort of assess people in terms of what's wrong or what has gone wrong instead of what strengths they have, right? So one time I was with this 80-year-old patient, and we had a medical student with us who presented this 80-year-old's story. And so this is a medical presentation. So they're discussing the patient. They're like, this is an 80-year-old man who has blank, blank, blank conditions, right? Now, because they're 80, there's about 12 of them, right? So he's listing them all out, and he gets to the end of the sentence, and the 80-year-old interrupts him, and he says, well, what's good about me?
Oh my God.
So, if you could write a patient presentation medically focused on their strengths, what would you write? Right. But our system is not designed to think that way. And we don't actually think that way as human beings either. So we just focus on like, what can't they do instead of what can they do? What have they accumulated? What are the good aspects of this stage? And I think that's something that I'm always trying to challenge, because I think the way you think of yourself and what you bring to the table really matters. And people just define that in terms of ability physically and ability to produce. Like, we live in a world where it's like, what can you generate financially or, from a productivity standpoint? And that's really not all there is to life. There's so much more to it. We are actually we're meant to be social creatures. We're meant to engage with other people in other ways. And so, yeah, I think it's a long-winded answer, but I think the myth is that everything has to be downhill after 65, and that, it's just a matter of trying to stave off that decline or manage that decline. And that's just not true.
I love that answer, honestly, because, I feel like as a society, we've kind of just become obsessed with youth. And there's me myself, I'm literally 25 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so old, all this and the next, I need to figure out everything. And it's no, you're in the first quarter of your life, you're doing okay. This is just one of the first few chapters. And I feel like everything just feels so rushed, but sometimes just slowing down and taking a second and recognizing where you are in whatever space and time that you're in, and just getting excited about getting old. Because I think someone said this to me and it really stuck with me, but it's that, aging is a privilege, because if you don't get old, then you die young, and no one wants to die young. So I think it's a really beautiful thing. And we just really need to start paying more attention to those 65 plus years, so that we can make them as valuable and as beautiful as we possibly can. So yeah, I really like that answer. Have you ever heard of Teepa Snow's positive approach to care?
Yes. Yeah. I do. I think she has a lot of really high value insights into thinking about caregiving and thinking about what it means to age, especially if people do have changes with their cognition. So absolutely. I mean, just to summarize for people who might not be familiar, I think it's very strengths based, just like how I was earlier alluding to. And it's very much based on how do we respect and honor somebody as they're aging, despite things that we might traditionally view as a deficit.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, we're based out of North Carolina, and she's from the area. So she's a local celebrity here. And I've gotten the chance to meet with her a couple of times. And I'm so giddy and excited about this, but I'm on a panel with her this coming Monday for, we're doing a screening of Bradley Cooper's caregiving documentary. And her and I and a few other wonderful social workers from the area are giving like a discussion afterwards. And I think that her framing of just like aging and her approach to care, just like you said, like so perfectly, like it's just, let's focus on what we still have and let's really celebrate that instead of harping on what we've lost. Like, who cares if you can't do this? You can still do this, this, and this. So I think that that's a really beautiful way of looking at it for sure. Um, but let's see. I'm trying to think which question I should ask you next because there's two different directions that we can go into. But I guess I'll ask this one because it's a quick one and I'm interested personally myself. So you're on a TED Talk stage and you're giving a talk on the secrets of aging well. What do you think your title would be?
So facetiously, I'm going to say never stop, never stopping.
Okay.
Which is just it's kind of a joke, but I think what I'm trying to get at with that is that you have to continue to grow and you have to continue to have just want to learn and want to be willing to change. And I find that when patients stop growing, stop learning, stop looking for the next thing, that's when actually physical and cognitive decline accelerates. And this is borne out in the research. So if there's one thing that I try to get people to think about, even when they're 35, it's just continue to grow, like continue to challenge yourself, continue to pick up new hobbies, continue to learn new things, like continue to expand your skill set. Like there is a tendency that I think people have. They get to a certain age and they're like, nope, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. And even in whether it's career, whether it's like the way they're, personality, whether it's character traits, it's sort of like, no, this is who I am, right? And take it or leave it. And that's fine to an extent.
Yeah.
But if you can sort of understand, okay, like this is my base, this is maybe a lot of the stuff, this is my comfort zone. How do I start to expand and grow? And there is such a difference between, I would say every patient that I have who's healthy into their 80s and 90s, they all have this in common. And I think that's quite striking.
Okay, that's really good to know. I mean, like that, I also think that surrounding yourself with, if possible, of course, like I feel like intergenerational relationships are just so valuable when it comes to like positive aging as well, not just for the older adult, but for everybody, every party that's involved. Like I think that that's just such a beautiful aspect of life. We had a tragic accident in my family a few years ago that resulted in one of my like cousins who was at the time like less than like a year old to move in with my grandparents. And it's been 10 years since that's happened, but my grandparents, I'm going to knock on wood when I say this, it feels like they're the exact same age as when this whole like ordeal started. So like they didn't think that in their 80s they would be taking care of like a newborn or like an infant, and here they were. So they kind of just like took the ball and ran with it. So I feel like
Love that.
having something to do and like giving that like new sense of purpose is just like so awesome and wonderful. And that doesn't have to be a new child. That could be a really cool new hobby, like whether it's, doing Legos or like jigsaw puzzles or starting a neighborhood walk group. Like I feel like all of those things are just that renewed sense of purpose is really, really something that's beautiful, especially in a country that is so focused on productivity, like you were saying earlier. Like productivity doesn't have to be yield in financial results or anything. It could yield in like a smile on your face, and that's honestly all that matters. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And you're absolutely right. The literature actually bears out what you're saying, which is that, older folks who live in multi-generational homes, you got to control a little bit for income level, but when you control for that, they absolutely do better than those who are living by themselves.
Absolutely.
So, in America, most Americans do not live even within a driving distance of their parents, like a 30-minute driving distance of their parents. That's like the norm here. That's not true in other countries. Many other cultures, it's intergenerational homes, multi-generational homes is the norm.
Right.
And I think it's something that we could really learn or try to reintroduce to just society at large.
Absolutely. I think it's just so beautiful. I mean, I've been telling my boyfriend we're going to have an ADU in our house for my mom because I do not want to live in anywhere that's not in the same neighborhood as her. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and that's on being brown. But you have been training at some of the world's most wonderful institutions, from Mount Sinai to Johns Hopkins, and now here you are at Penn State Health. So you've been kind of on the cutting edge. So talk to me a little bit about some some or just one tech or innovation like idea that you have found to be like super excited about within aging care?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think a lot of times people in geriatrics tend to be like a little bit skeptical of tech just because a lot of tech is built for people who are younger and who are more tech savvy. And so a lot of older adults either are not going to access or it's not just not useful. It's not going to add anything to their care. But the thing that I actually do feel very excited is the idea of doing wearables and using AI based or machine learning really based analytics to start to predict frailty, fall risk, and just changes in clinical status, right? So if you have wearables or you have surveillance in the home that gives you data on how fast people move, right? How their gait is,
Right.
how much they're actually eating, maybe a little bit of a sense of their metabolism slowing or changing, their heart rate, the sort of the traditional vitals that we think about. Um, yeah, I don't know if I lost you. We might have lost our presenter.
So sorry. I have no idea what happened. It would not be a live stream without at least one hiccup now, would it?
No, it would not. That's fine.
Um, you were talking, please.
Yeah, where was I? So I was saying,
Wearables.
yeah, yeah. So I think if you collect all of that data, right,
Mhm.
and you think about what you could do with a predictive model,
Mm.
this is already being done. Like this kind of work is already started in all sorts of different ways. I think we're still a few years away from this truly being like prime time for all older adults, but we're getting there. This will happen, I think, in the next 5 to 7 years. When you have all of that data, you have the ability for physicians to start responding proactively instead of reactively. Everything we do in medicine is reactive right now, and we're getting very close to starting to be more proactive. And I'm very, very excited about that. And I'm really actively trying to think about what does healthcare, like what does a clinic model look like that incorporates all of that proactive data. So yeah, that I would say that's probably the one thing I'm the most excited about.
I totally and completely agree. And I think that like medicine thrives the most when it goes hand in hand with public health. And public health truly is all about prevention and, getting it to the root of the problem before it even really like arises. So I think that's a wonderful answer. And something that's like we've also noticed with Carriaya and our platform is that for those who may not know, we match undergraduate college students who are pursuing health careers with anyone who maybe needs some in-home companionship care services. And like I guess, for lack of a better word, resistance to tech significantly decreases when someone is just takes the time to introduce it to them, and these like 19, 20, 21 year olds are all like tech natives, so they understand the technology really, really well, and they love like sharing that knowledge. And so as long as there's like a listening ear, and older adults love learning, like that's one myth that I've seen in my work with older adults is, oh, like, they're stuck in their ways, this, that, and the next. And I'm like, no, like if you just take a second and like show them something like cool, who wouldn't want to learn something new? So I
Yeah.
think that really just taking the time and like showing them the tools that are at their disposal can go a really, really long way.
Yeah, you've touched on a key point, which is the pedagogical approach matters, right?
Mm.
So, and when I say that, I mean the way that you teach someone, right? So, just think about the fact that older adults were taught and learned learning
Mhm.
in specific ways a few decades ago, and the way we teach has changed. And so tech. There's specific ways that you and I, like, if we pick up a new phone,
Right.
we go through that phone in a specific way that's actually quite generationally defined in terms of like trying to learn what it does.
Interesting. Huh.
Older adult does not apply that same learning methodology and gets easily frustrated when it doesn't result in learning how to use the phone. So what they do is they shut down and focus on the two functions that they really need to know, right? So thinking about that in that way is part of what will help us like connect with older adults, because I completely agree with you. They're actually very receptive to learning. You just have to customize the pedagogy to them.
Exactly. Wow, I love that. You were just a ball of insights today, Dr. Thomas, and I am all about it. Who would have thought that this I'm just loving this conversation, every single moment of it. But like I guess like now that we have talked about like the positives that tech can like bring into like the lives of older adults, what do you think tech is like getting wrong about aging and elder care? Like, is there something, have you given that any thought?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a reason why most of, or many, I'm not gonna say most, many of my mentors
Mhm.
are very skeptical about tech, and I totally get that because their concern is, and this is borne out by the people who run the big tech companies, right? Is
Mhm.
that tech entrepreneurs often think that their tech is going to replace physical human connection.
Right. I've
And
been seeing that a lot too.
yeah, I mean, recently the CEO of Facebook got up and said at one in an investor meeting, right, that oh,
Mhm.
most Americans are looking for more friends. Most Americans are lonely, which is so true in the older population, right? Social isolation affects about 25% of elders and is a huge reason for depression, for worse health outcomes. I mean, it's such a major problem for most Western societies, actually. And I was like, oh, great, he's identified the problem. That's a great point. And then he said, we're going to create AI avatars that now can replace human beings so people can actually have the 5 to 6 close friends that they want to have. And I
Mm,
was like, we're missing the point, right?
that's
We're
right
completely
there.
missing the point.
Right. That's, I feel like that's like, I love when technology enables human connection. Like why that's why I think sometimes AI gets like villainized in this space is because they're like, oh, it's trying to replace it. And I'm like, no, it's trying to allow for that human connection to occur because, and also like sometimes so, sometimes it can be the case that there is absolutely zero option for human connection and like you absolutely cannot bring that in, and then maybe it's more AI to kind of quote unquote try and like step in and like be the bare minimum or at least be something that's there to like help out. But I don't think the goal is ever to have human connection be replaced. I think the goal is for AI to create more time in humans' lives to be able to actually make those connections. So I
Right.
think that's really, really cool. Are there any specific tools? I know you mentioned wearables, but are there any like more specific tools that you're excited to bring into your own geriatrics practice?
Yeah, and honestly, some of these tools exist and some of them don't, but I feel like we have the capability to build them.
Tell
So I'm
me about the ones that don't exist. Oh my gosh.
yeah. So I do think the idea of a mental health app that gives people access to like a CBT based or a therapy based curriculum. So this would not replace an actual therapist, but
Mhm.
this would basically be an interactive way to go through the worksheets, right? Like the workbooks that the therapist gives you, and sort of helps guide that, customize that, and honestly would then forward those answers and forward that work back to a real therapist.
Mhm.
I would see that as being an extremely useful piece, right? Because we have a huge issue in terms of like shortage of mental health providers. And so if we gave that as a way to kind of bridge those gaps in between visits, even, I think that actually would expand who can access mental health services. I think that's a huge piece of it. Caregiver support tools. I think the idea that I would say, so when I get questions posed to me as a physician, right? 80% of those questions are things that probably a really, really good Google search would have figured out, but they're coming to me for the fact they want someone to sign off on it, right? And be like, yeah, you found the right information.
Mhm.
They're worried about all the misinformation that accompanies all the junk that they're going to find on that search as well. And they want to make sure that it actually is relevant to their specific loved one that they're asking me the question about, right? So that's the
Mhm.
caregiver stress, right? And they don't have the time to do the Google search, so they send me the question. Well,
Hmm.
honestly, if I had a tailored tool that could answer some of those questions, then I can just like review the proposed answer and sign off on it. That would actually save me a ton of time, and it would be evidence based. It would be based on information that's already out there. It wouldn't be totally unsafe, right? There's still an opportunity for human review, or even like having a clinical nurse who could review that for me. I think that would actually triage like 80% of the questions that caregivers have in
Mhm.
between visits. And
Mhm.
then that 20% would be like, hey, yeah, this is actually more complex. Why don't we get you in for a visit? Or, actually, this does deserve a phone call or an extra video visit or something else, right? So there's ways I think that we can leverage LLM models to actually provide more caregiver support without replacing the doctor caregiver connection without replacing that relationship. Exercise apps, nutrition guidance, I think those things could be even more customized and personalized. And there's some of these tools out there, but I would love to see these tools specifically for the aging adult and for adults with cognitive impairment, etc. We're not quite there, but I think those tools will eventually become widespread.
I love that answer. I think all of those are super, super necessary. And just like you said, really doable to get done. Absolutely as well. And just, I also love that you mentioned caregivers in this scenario, because I feel like a lot of the times we forget that like there's a whole care team that's involved when it comes to a lot of like older adults. And a lot of the times like caregiver health is like the health of the caregiver is the last thing that's discussed and talked about. And I think that like a lot of the times geriatricians are kind of on the front line of seeing that decline in caregivers. So do you have any mental health like tools and tips for family caregivers that are in the position of taking care of an older adult who's their loved one?
The biggest thing I would say is you have to learn to take care of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the principle on the airplane, right? Like put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on someone else.
100%.
If you, and this is what I find resonates, because I will tell people over and over again, hey, you need to take a break. You need to make time for yourself. You need to take a respite break and let someone else care for your loved one. People struggle with that, right? And maybe some of it is like, oh, I'm the only one who really knows, like, they feel guilt. There's all of this complex emotions that go into caregiving, right? And it becomes their identity and they don't know how to not do that. What I always tell people is you are not going to be the best caregiver you can be for your loved one. Your loved one is not getting the care that you want them to have. Take care of yourself. And when I frame it that way, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, well, it's like I have to frame it outside of them. I have to frame it, as like you're not going to be a good caregiver to get them to understand. But I will do that if it pushes them to take that 3-day vacation. Sometimes I've had to do that. I've had to like literally convince someone to take a 3-day weekend trip and let someone else watch their husband or their loved or their parent. And then they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, that trip was the best thing I did in the last 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, really important, is to say, if you want to be a good caregiver, you actually need this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think hearing that from like someone with so much authority as yourself is really, really helpful, because again, a Google search would probably be able to tell someone that they need a break, but like having external validation and like knowing that like, hey, like you got to put yourself first. Because honestly, something that was shocking, like that I wasn't even aware of before I got into this space, is like caregivers oftentimes have more health complications than like they don't even like live as long as the person that they're taking care of sometimes, because of the health complications that result from the stressors of being a caregiver. And that is so heartbreaking to me. And like, we all know this, this, I know this, like anyone who's had to deal as a sandwich generation person or has aging parents knows that caregiving in America is in crisis right now. So I guess from your view as a clinician, what do you think is breaking? And is there anything that's giving you hope in this space that, we're moving in the right direction when it comes to caregiving and caregiver support?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, is that, and just for, I don't know who's watching, and maybe everyone's already familiar with the term sandwich generation, but, you have more than a quarter of Americans who are actually, 60, 70 million people or about, who are actually sandwich generation, which means they have to take care of kids as well as their older parents. And so they're spending 20 plus hours on taking care of their parents. They're spending about 30 hours a week on their childcare. So that's a huge amount of time in exchange, in addition to working 50, 55 hours in a job, right? So it's not sustainable, and that center just cannot hold unless they get support. And we live in such individualized sort of ways of living that often people don't have any support outside of that unit. And so that's a huge issue. It's just not sustainable. And that's only going to increase, right? So we're having less and less kids, and we have more and more people who are aging and living longer, but who might still be quite sick, right? So people live longer, but they're living longer with more health conditions, including cognitive impairment, right? So you're creating even more of a care burden not the adult is not the burden, but what they need is sometimes a burden for the person who has to provide it.
Right.
And we do not have people certified to help with that either. So that's a huge issue. And I know that sounds really depressing in some ways. I do feel hopeful that we do have more and more people who are starting to wake up to that reality and are interested in thinking about healthcare in that way. So from a physician standpoint, I think people are starting to say, wait a minute, why do we focus all of our training and the way we think about healthcare in terms of organs and illnesses instead of how do we keep people out of the hospital and healthier longer, right? Instead of individual like patients' journeys. And that is hard for a lot of reasons that I could get into. But that's a huge aspect of it. I think there's more and more interest in that. I think from the policy side and even the business side, we are just starting to realize that we're being short-sighted when we focus on more hospitals, more nursing homes, instead of how do we actually reimburse and take care of the people who are taking care of people outside of the healthcare system, right? Because what you don't understand, what most like politicians don't understand, is that it is more cost effective to pay someone to take care of their older adult in the home than not pay them, wait for them to show up in the ED after a fall, and then you're spending a couple $100,000, a lot of it coming out of the state budget, right? To now figure out what to do next, right? So it's just we're being very short-sighted if we don't think that way, and I truly believe that's the future is when people start to realize that and then align the reimbursement, because people are like, oh well, we can't afford to pay for home health. That's not true. We can't afford the current system, right? And so if we start redirecting money into home health, I guarantee we will see the benefit in the long term, but we have to be willing to think long term, and we have to think about reimbursement models that are more long term.
I feel like we could literally have a podcast episode just on that, because I have so much to say about that. Like, honestly, put a geriatrician, put a physician in the White House, because what are we doing right now? Like, this is just not the way that things should be going. And like, there's so many ways to improve this system. Like, I feel like the entire caregiving atmosphere is stuck in the 80s and has been for so long, and it's been like just craving innovation and like in need of that. And like, I do think that we are starting to move away from it, and there are like non-traditional models coming out similar to Caregiver, and I think that that's kind of where we need to like shift our focus. But we truly are in a crisis. Like, I think right now the ratio of older adults to middle-aged individuals is 7-1. By 2030, that ratio is going to be 3-1. So we're in a caregiving crisis right now. What do you think is going to happen in 2030? And also, I mean, there's like, I don't want to get like political by any means, but like a large population of the care workforce tends to be undocumented. And there's a lot of the times that with the mass deportations and things like that happening right now, that's causing an even bigger gap in caregiving. And so we need to come up with solutions quick and figure out what we're going to do in order to be able to continue taking care of older adults. But I guess I'll leave you with this one question, because we're just talking about it. But if you had a little bit of a magic wand and you were like, I can change one policy to improve aging care tomorrow, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a hard question. There's so many things. I'm going to pick one, and not because I think it's the best one per se, but I think it's actually the most like, imagine if we funded senior centers in every neighborhood like schools.
Ooh.
And those senior centers had nutrition support, had exercise classes that were, engaged for older adults, had care coordination support, had social, activities and other support all in one place. And they were walkable or at least within 10 minutes or 15 minutes of every older adult. Imagine if that's how we funded senior centers, and imagine the impact on healthcare for all older adults if we actually had a network like that.
I've never heard of that idea before, and I'm obsessed with it. That's incredible. Oh my gosh. Honestly,
I can't take credit. It's definitely been talked in the geriatric circles for a long time, way before I came on the scene. But absolutely, it's one of my favorite
I'm giving you credit for it, and I'm gonna send you a very long email after this, and we're gonna make it happen, because that's such a good idea. I mean, we should start piloting that. We could use the college students to staff it, honestly, and we could just like get a little something going. I'm sure we could start, we could write some grants and try and oh my gosh, so many ideas cooking in my head right now. I'll be sending you a very, very long email after this.
Yeah.
I love that idea. That's really, really wonderful.
Honestly, universities should leverage it, right? Because universities have a lot of those supports already, and universities could easily build that even within their campus structure, right? Like it actually wouldn't be a lot, and it would be a big PR win for them anyway. I actually think it's something universities could really leverage.
I think that there's I think it's ASU that's kind of a little bit doing that right now. I don't know if you've heard, but they have like a
Yes. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, they have like a Mirabella or something like that is what it's
Yep.
called. But they have for those at home, they have like a is it a nursing home? It's a retirement home.
I want to say retirement community kind of thing,
Retirement
but
community.
I could be wrong on that. I've only read their press release. I haven't actually like delved into their model.
I haven't looked into it too much either, but it just looked so cool. But it's on campus at ASU, but in Phoenix, which I think is just so cool. So that's something that all universities could start concepting pretty soon. But we are coming towards the end of our call, so I do want to ask this one question that I've been really excited to ask you, and that is, what's a patient story that stayed with you and shaped the way that you practice today?
Ooh, it's so hard. There are so many, and I'm trying to think of what direction I want to take this in, because there's patient stories that are really, that gave me, like, lit this fire underneath me to say, like, the system is broken. There are patient stories that are really taught me about human connection. So I'm almost like, which story should I give you?
Give me both.
Yeah, I think the story, you know what, I'll tell you a more recent story, because there's a story that I could tell you from medical school, but I'll tell you something more recent. So I did this geriatrics fellowship at Hopkins, and part of that is doing memory care and dementia care. And this story kind of helped me understand why I cared so much about dementia, and I hadn't before, right? So when I was training, and this reflects back to the way that medical school education is set up, I wanted to fix problems that I could actually fix, right? So if it wasn't a problem that I could fix, I was less interested in it. And that is a huge mistake to make as a young medical student. And it was a mistake I definitely made, right? So I was like, dementia care, not super interesting to me because I can't cure that. So, you know, I'll let someone else be the specialist on that. And like, I'll tell someone, I think you may have dementia, you should go see the specialist because there's nothing I can really do for you. That's just so not true, right? Because we don't need to cure something to be involved in healing and taking care of that person. And so I had this patient who came to me who was still very, very active, you know, listening to opera, going on amazing vacations with their partner, you know, and just, you know, involved with their kids. I mean, just like kind of what you would want to see an older adult doing. And they felt that their memory was changing, and they could sense that. They had gone to a couple different physicians, including a neurologist, over the last 2 years. And because they hadn't scored high enough on the screening test, they had just been told, oh yeah, you've got a little bit of change, but it's probably just your age. You're fine, right? And they were like, I know I'm not fine. I've been a smart person my whole life, and I'm just not thinking the same way I was before. Their, you know, their partner could see that. And so they came in and they were like, you know, we just want help thinking through this, and just taking a really detailed history and understanding who they were. I was like, I don't think that this is just normal aging, even though you're scoring super well. I think it's because of the fact that you have such a high level of cognitive function to start with. So as you decline, you're not declining far enough to sort of pick up on some of these screeners. And so I actually ended up fighting with their insurance company, but we actually got them a amyloid scan to look for Alzheimer's, and it came back positive, right? And that was a big moment for them. They were so appreciative that we'd gone through this workup and had an answer, right? I thought they were going to be upset, and they were sad. They were grieving all of the possibilities that they had lost or might lose, but they were also so grateful for that opportunity to have that insight, that clarity. And based on that, they actually moved into a retirement community where they had more support. They told their kids, they started checking off the last things on their quote unquote bucket list, right? Like it reframed the way they wanted to think about their life. And 6 months later, she actually declined a lot faster once she got to a certain point. And so at that point, things were really different. She wasn't able to take the trips. She wasn't able to engage in the same way. She wasn't Her memory was very limited. It was very distressing to her partner, but he was so grateful for the 6 months that he felt like we gave him
Right.
partner. And that was honestly so humbling for me, and just a reminder of what we can offer to patients, even if we can't quote unquote cure them. So people get scared about working with aging adults because we're like, well, they're all going to die. It reminds us of our own mortality. It makes us feel helpless. But
Mhm.
there's so much that you can offer, that you can be a part of, that you can learn from, even as things may change. And there's nothing that we can do to intrinsically cure that change, right? But we can be a part of that journey, and we
Mhm.
can change that quality of life. We can make that life meaningful. And that's why, going back to what I said at the very beginning, if there's one thing, right, that I want people to take away, it's like, if we're all dying slowly, which we are,
Mhm.
how do we learn to enjoy that journey instead of just trying to avoid the destination?
Wow. I'm not gonna lie, I was gonna let you go with that one, but that was so beautiful that I do have to ask a quick follow-up question. I wasn't gonna ask this question, but I just, because I've heard from so many doctors who've been in the position of, my dad had a heart attack last year. It was pretty bad, and he had to get, like a cabbage procedure, open heart surgery, and it was, of course, like a lot. It was a lot, and I spent a lot of time on the
Mm,
phone with insurance companies, with hospital like people, and it was no fun. So from like a clinician's perspective, when insurance or hospital policies kind of directly conflict with what is best for your patient, how do you navigate that? Or are you just kind of like you can't do anything, like I'm so curious.
yeah, it's really hard. And, I just want to say, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Like,
That experience is not unique. Unfortunately, it's more common than I wish it was. I would say, I'm going to try to keep this light because it's easy for us to feel like super frustrated about this. And I am super frustrated about it, but I try to focus on like, what can I change, right? Like, what can I do?
nice.
One aspect is actually really fun, is that insurance companies, no matter how sort of short-sighted their policies are, they usually do have some sort of like, quote unquote guideline that they're basing it off of. And often I'll find that guideline and I actually feed it in nowadays to like ChatGPT. And I'm like, if I wanted to construct a reason through explanation of why this patient doesn't fit this guideline, what would I do? And it
Mhm.
generates that for me. And then
Right.
I actually like basically use a script when I call the insurance company, and I'm like, well, this is what your guideline says, and this is why it's wrong. And I've actually won the 2 or 3 that I've done recently using that approach, because I'm essentially just fighting them with the tools that they're using. And I think a lot of physicians in the past have like banged their head against the wall because we don't understand where in the world they're pulling this from. So I think it's sort of like, you got to know how to play by their rules and try to beat the rules. You can't play a game if you don't know the rules, right? So I think that's a piece of it. But I think part of it is just also aligning the patient's expectations with that too, right? And being like, hey, I know it's a super frustrating process. Here's our short-term option. Here's our long-term option. Here's like how I'm going to support you as we wait for this. And if
Mhm.
I think that this is too urgent or emergent, these are our contingencies. And if you help people understand that, I think it helps people have a lot less stress and fear as they go through that process. But most doctors don't know that. And this is why we honestly need social workers. We need care managers who can help us with this, because the system is so arcane that honestly, this is not a, MDs, DOs, NPs are going to fix the whole thing, right? Like, we need a team around us. And that's why I'm such a big fan of team-based clinic or care models, because it allows us to like leverage all of those resources.
I love that so much. And you like that, this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying like AI to give back time to do the things that you actually should be doing, because why should you have to spend time like writing up a script to call an insurance company when you can get that done for yourself in 2 seconds? And then
Right.
just like you said, like I feel like insurance companies are using all of these like AI models to deny all of these claims. So it's like, let me fight you back with some AI, because what the heck, like that's fight AI with AI. Like, and
Yeah.
I think that's the power of it that we just don't really talk about nearly enough. But there's the audience in the comments is really, really grateful. We have great idea, such an important point for caregivers, can't pour from an empty cup. Someone's loving the idea of schools for seniors. And this person said, thank you so much for putting this on, Dr. Thomas. Thank you for your insight and caring nature. So we've got some fans in the audience as well.
I'm
But
humbled. Appreciate that.
I really, really do appreciate you taking the time with me today. This was such an insightful conversation, I think, for me, for first and foremost, but I think for everybody involved. And I honestly am really excited to have another conversation with you if you'll have us, because there's
Yeah,
so much to talk about. And I can't wait to kind of continue picking your brain.
I would love to. I would love to. Just tell me when.
Awesome. You heard it here, folks. He promises he's going to do another podcast with us. So
Okay.
we'll do that. But thank you so much for being here. And with that, I hope everyone has a lovely Friday and a wonderful start to the weekend. Go out and enjoy this lovely summer weather. It's a little less hot than it's been the rest of the week. So I hope that's the case for everywhere else too. But thank you guys for being here. Bye, everyone.